When Herb Alpert was poor and making music in his garage in 1962, he was on the verge of taking the biggest risk of his life. His current net worth is close to $1 billion. The startling thing is that it all began with $200 and a sound he happened to find. This is the secret tale of how one musician's daring risk paid off more than anyone could have ever dreamed, from outselling the Beatles to creating an empire. Herb Alpert was born on March 31, 1935, in Boyle Heights, Los Angeles, and his life starts there. Louis and Tilly Alpert, his parents, were immigrants of Jewish descent. His mother is from Romania, and his father is from Ukraine. In pursuit of brighter prospects in America, they had abandoned their challenging existence in Eastern Europe. It was a small house. However, there was a lot of music. Louis was a tailor by trade, but he loved playing the mandolin. He frequently improvised melodies while playing by ear. But Tilly had been a violinist by training. She supported organization, discipline, and the effectiveness of practice. In their home, music served as much than just enjoyment. It was a lifestyle. Herb was raised in this world. Life became more difficult during the Great Depression, but their devotion remained unabated. The Alperts made sure their kids had access to music instruction in spite of their financial difficulties. Herb wasn't the only member of the family with musical talent. David, his older brother, was a drummer. Mimi, his sister, was an accomplished pianist. Their house resembled a tiny symphony. Without even realizing it, the three of them experimented, learned, and shaped one another's skills while playing together. Herb, however, was unique. He was reserved, reticent, and frequently had trouble expressing himself. Music came easily, but words were difficult. He experienced a life-altering event when he was 8 years old. He first heard the trumpet in a Melrose Elementary music appreciation lesson. It clicked the instant he held it. It was more than a piece of equipment. His voice, was heard. It was difficult to learn to play. The trumpet required control, strength, and breath. His early practice sessions were unpleasant for everyone around him, and his first lessons were frustrating. The noise was complained about by the neighbors. His mother's response was different. She urged him to turn up the volume. She wasn't merely protecting him. She was urging him to accept and take ownership of his sound. Herb was performing at neighborhood dances by the time he was a teenager. Making money wasn't the only goal of these jobs. He learned how to perform live for the first time from them. He gained skills in energy play, crowd reading, and adaptation. He developed a fascination with recording at the same time. He began experimenting after obtaining a wire recorder. He was a diligent music student at Fairfax High School. He was experimenting, not merely having fun. But he wasn't just interested in music. In addition, he was a gymnastics specialist on the team. That ended when he was sidelined by an emergency appendectomy. After giving up sports, he devoted himself to music. He went on to study music at the University of Southern California after graduating in 1953. He honed his skills while playing with the Trojan Marching Band. However, his tenure at USC was brief. He was enlisted into the U.S. Army during the Korean War in 1954. Rather from going to war, he was assigned to the 6th Army Band at the Presidio in San Francisco. He was driven to discover his own musical voice by this experience. He then claimed that being around by so many gifted athletes drove him to come up with new ideas. He thought about acting when he got back to Los Angeles in 1957, but he quickly discovered that music remained his true calling. He teamed up with songwriter Rob Wirtz and began working behind the scenes. They collaborated on songwriting and production, and their first significant hit came in 1959. The surf rock duo Jan and Dean's song Baby Talk peaked at number 10 on the Billboard charts. Another collaboration, this time with songwriter Lou Adler, resulted from that success. The two composed music for Sam Cooke and other discerning record artists. They co-wrote Wonderful World in 1959, and Cooke recorded it the following year. He changed a few of the lyrics, giving them a school-related twist that appealed to the audience. The song peaked at number 12 on the Billboard, becoming a huge smash. Number 2 on the R&B chart and in the Hot 100. Numerous musicians have covered it, making it one of Cooke's most cherished albums over time. The foundation for one of the most prosperous independent record labels in history was laid in 1961 when Herb Alpert and Jerry Moss first met. Born on May 8, 1935, in the Bronx, Moss attended Brooklyn College to study English before entering the music industry as a promoter. In 1960, he relocated to Los Angeles in search of work in the expanding field. Born in Los Angeles on March 31, 1935, Alpert was already well known as a songwriter and pianist. He was well known for playing the trumpet and co-wrote Wonderful World for Sam Cooke. Moss requested Alpert to perform on a song called Love Is Back in Style, which is how their paths first met. Something greater than each of them could have imagined resulted from that meeting. They took a risk and launched their own label in 1962. Together, they started Carnival Records with barely $100. Tell It to the Birds, their debut single, was credited to Dor Alpert, a moniker Herb employed in his early work. After receiving some notice, the song sold for $750 to Dot Records. It was a start, but not a fortune. Then they encountered an issue. Carnival Records was already being used by another business. Something fresh was what they needed. Using the initials of their last names, they selected records with the letters A and M. It was easy, but effective. The early years were everything from glitzy. With just a desk, a piano, and 2 phone lines, they operated A&M out of Alpert's garage in West Hollywood. From recording to distribution, they managed everything on their own. The lone bull then appeared. After witnessing a bullfight in Tijuana, Alpert had the idea. He wanted to write a song that would express that excitement. He produced something original by combining layered trumpets with sound effects of a cheering audience. The record became popular after it was released in August 1962. It sold more than 700,000 copies and rose to number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100. This was huge for a small label that ran out of a garage. Alpert and Moss moved forward, their hands slamming. Alpert's debut album, The Lonely Bull, was released later that year. The album sold successfully thanks to the success of the title tune, demonstrating A&M's ability to compete with major labels. They continued after that. In order to broaden their repertoire beyond Alpert's songs, they signed new musicians like Sergio Mendes, Brazil 66, and the Baja Marimba Band. A&M stood out from other labels for one reason. They allowed artists to express themselves freely. A&M trusted musicians to try new things and establish their own sound, while major record labels concentrated on creating hits quickly. A wide variety of artists were drawn to this strategy. The Carpenters, a soft rock duo, jazz great Quincy Jones, and many others made A&M their home. A&M outgrew its garage headquarters by 1966. They relocated to Hollywood's famed Charlie Chaplin Studios. A testament to their progress in a short period of time. However, the company's core remained constant despite their expansion. Alpert was in charge of the artistic aspects. Moss handled the situation. They never lost the trust that was the foundation of their connection. A&M was one of the world's most prestigious independent labels for almost 30 years. They established a reputation for prioritizing artists, signed iconic performers, and put out groundbreaking music. They had already permanently altered the music industry by the time they sold the business in 1989 for $500 million. Neither a recording studio nor a book on music theory produced Herb Alpert's distinctive sound. It originated from something much more surprising, a Tijuana bullfight. He frequently traveled to Mexico with Jerry Moss, his business partner, in the early 1960s. He was profoundly affected by the fervor of the audience, the spectacle of the fights, and most importantly, the sound of the brass bands. There was more to these than background music. As matadors entered the ring, they contributed to the spectacle by blaring triumphal fanfares. He remembered the intensity of it all. Then came the turning point in the story. Alpert saw one of Mexico's most well-known matadors, Carlos Aruza, in a bullfight in 1962. Miguel Bravo, a musician with connections to one of the nation's best trumpet players, Rafael Mendez, led the band that day. Alpert felt the music, not just heard it. The audience was excited by the sound of the drums, the piercing blasts of the trumpets, and the rhythm. There was more to it than the arena show. It has to do with the mood the music produced. That sensation accompanied him back to Los Angeles, where he began to consider how to document it. He had been given a song called Twinkle Star by songwriter Saul Lake about the same time. Alpert knew it needed something more, but it had potential. He radically modified it, inspired by what he had heard in Tijuana. To produce the rich, multi-layered sound of a mariachi brass band, he overdubbed his trumpet. To give it the feel of a live event, he included crowd sounds. It sounded like nothing else on American radio when it was done. He changed its name to The Lonely Bull. When the song was released in 1962, it quickly gained popularity and made it into the Billboard Top 10. It was a sea change for American mainstream music as much as for Alpert. Millions of people were first exposed to a sound that combined pop and jazz elements with traditional mariachi music by The Lonely Bull. The song's popularity also paved the way for A&M Records, which is even bigger. Alpert and Moss had recently started a label, and this was their first release. The Lonely Bull album sold more than 1 million copies in a matter of weeks. The most noteworthy aspect? Alpert recorded a lot of it in his garage. He used what he had on hand because he didn't have a full band at the time. To provide the impression of a vast brass section, he repeatedly stacked his trumpet. The renowned Wrecking Crew assisted in refining the final recordings at Hollywood's Conway Recording Studios. The end effect was a brand new sound that was both familiar and new. Alpert had discovered his recipe, and the hits continued to come in the ensuing years. Two of Going Places' most well-known songs were released in 1965. With its characteristic horn blasts that resembled an automobile honk, Tijuana Taxi had a joyful spirit. Julius Wechter's Spanish Flea was so well-liked that it was eventually selected as the theme for the dating game. Whipped cream and other treats solidified their place among the world's most popular performers. It dominated the charts after its 1965 release, selling more than 6 million copies in the United States alone. It remained in the top 40 for an incredible 141 weeks and topped the Billboard album chart for 8 weeks. It was in the top 10 for 61 of those weeks. It was uncommon to have such success. Alpert's sales even surpassed those of Frank Sinatra and the Beatles at one time in 1966. The soundtrack became as well known as the cover. Dolores Erickson, the model, was wrapped in what appeared to be whipped cream, but it was actually shaving cream. The intense studio lights would have caused real whipped cream to melt. It was a striking, evocative, and unforgettable image. Its legacy took an unexpected turn when it was revealed that Erickson was 3 months pregnant at the time of the shoot. Even after several decades, the cover is still regarded as one of the most famous in all of music, prompting innumerable tributes and parodies. The record established Alpert's distinctive musical style. His Tijuana brass created successes like A Taste of Honey and Whipped Cream by fusing pop melodies with Latin rhythms. These songs went beyond becoming popular on the radio. They were everywhere. They were included in TV series, movies, and advertisements, and they were utilized as background music in the dating game. The album's popularity demonstrated that instrumental music could top popular charts, something that had not been accomplished by many musicians. The Grammys saw the same kind of success. The instrumental song A Taste of Honey achieved an almost unprecedented feat by winning Record of the Year. It was a turning point in Alpert's professional life. He won 9 Grammy Awards throughout the years, demonstrating his impact over several decades. With Rise, a mellow jazz-funk instrumental that became another huge hit in 1979, he adopted a new sound. It brought Alpert to a younger audience and took up the Best Pop Instrumental Performance Award. His music was still becoming well-known in the 2010s. His album Steppin' Out took up the Best Pop Instrumental Album Award in 2014. His status as one of the greatest musicians was further cemented in 2007 when he was granted the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. Really took the industry by surprise. At the height of Beatlemania in 1966, he accomplished an apparently impossible feat on the Billboard charts. He sold more than the Beatles. He once had 5 albums in the top 20 and 4 in the top 10, a feat that wasn't surpassed until decades later by Taylor Swift. His Tijuana brass sold more than 13 million recordings in that year. Alpert was offering something quite distinct from what the Beatles were doing when they reinvented rock. Rebellion was not the theme of his music. It was all about rhythm, melody, and good time. Young listeners as well as older generations who weren't as interested in the rock revolution found it appealing. Then there was another shock. Alpert, who is mostly recognized as an instrumentalist, took the stage in 1968. The outcome was Hal David and Burt Bacharach's This Guy's in Love with You. It was never intended to be successful. He sang the song as a personal serenade to his then-wife, Sharon May Lubin, during his informal performance in his CBS television special, The Beat of the Brass. However, CBS received a ton of demands to release it as a single following the broadcast. The reaction was instantaneous. By June 22, 1968, the song had risen to the top of the Billboard Hot 100, where it remained for 4 weeks. In Canada and Australia, it likewise peaked at number 1. Alpert became the first musician to have both a number 1 instrumental hit, Rise, and a number 1 vocal hit, This Guy's in Love with You, as a result of his popularity. In a way no one had anticipated, his ability to switch from instrumental music to singing demonstrated his versatility. When Herb Alpert and Lonnie Hall first met in 1966, it had a profound impact on their lives and careers. Alpert has already achieved fame. He co-founded A&M Records and led the Tijuana Brass. Hall has recently replaced Sergio Mendes as the lead vocalist for Brazil 66. When Alpert signed the band to his label, they first met. With successes like Masquanada and The Fool on the Hill making waves, Paul's voice became a defining characteristic of their music. There had been a spark from the beginning. Although her voice drew Alpert in, there was more to her than just her musical ability. They continued to cross paths while collaborating on various projects. They were prepared to move forward. They were married more than once, though. 3 ceremonies were held. A private one first. Then a rabbi-led ceremony. Finally, they were married in Hawaii by a priest. Although it was an odd beginning, it revealed something genuine about them. They have been married for more than 50 years, which is uncommon in Hollywood and even less common in music. Together, they have a daughter named Aria who was born in 1976. She pursued her own artistic career and became an actor. Alpert's inventiveness extends beyond music. He is also a skilled sculptor and painter. Like his jazz, his painting is instinctive and impromptu. His Spirit Totem series consists of tall bronze sculptures that are modeled after native totem poles. Some are as tall as 18 feet. He characterizes them as frozen smoke, which perfectly captures their flowing motion. His vibrantly colored and abstract paintings have been shown both domestically and abroad. Some have even made their way into prominent museums' permanent collections. According to Alpert, music and art are fundamentally the same. Feeling and catching something in the present are the sources of both. Galleries all over the world have hosted his exhibitions. Whispered Conversations, a collection he produced during the pandemic, was shown at Heather James Fine Art in 2023. The way the pieces appeared to whisper to one another inspired the moniker. It was a very intimate effort that reflected a period of self-reflection. Alpert's inventiveness, however, goes even farther. He has been active on Broadway as well. He co-produced Tony Kushner's groundbreaking Pulitzer Prize-winning play, Angels in America, in 1993. Additionally, he supported the musical Jelly's Last Jam, which is about the jazz great Jelly Roll Morton. The Boy from Oz, a musical based on the biography of Peter Allen, and 7 Guitars were among their other endeavors. The Beatles were being outsold by Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass by 1966. Their songs were aired worldwide, their albums topped the charts, and Alpert himself rose to fame. However, a few years later, he took a choice that nobody anticipated. He turned to leave. He was exhausted from the relentless pressure to tour, record, and perform. He even declared, "Is my enemy," at one point. Alpert had to get back on track. He stepped away from performing and concentrated on discovering the true meaning of music for him. He received instruction from Carmine Caruso, a trumpet instructor who had never even played the instrument, during this period. However, playing notes was not the focus of Caruso's lessons. They had to do with emotion, control, and getting back in touch with the music. Later on, Alpert discovered that his trumpet was not the actual instrument. It was him, his feelings, his fervor. However, the music business had changed. Instrumental pop was not selling as well by the late 1970s. Alpert made an effort to keep up, even trying out a disco rendition of popular brass tunes from Tijuana. However, he disapproved of the sound and abandoned the idea altogether. His manner seemed archaic. Something fresh was what he needed. Then everything changed in 1979. The song Rise was created by producer Andy Armour and his nephew Randy Badaz Alpert. They gave the disco tune, which was initially fast, a smooth, mesmerizing groove by slowing it down to 100 beats per minute. The difference was entirely due to that one adjustment. It took off after the release of Richest. It became the first performer to reach the top of the charts as both a vocalist and an instrumentalist when it reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in October 1979. It sold millions of copies, won a Grammy, and gained even more popularity after appearing in a significant scene on General Hospital, which at the time was one of the most popular soap operas. When the infamous B.I.G. sampled the bassline and hypnotized decades later, its influence endured, demonstrating that Rise was more than just a hit, it was ageless. Alpert demonstrated with that achievement that he was not mired in the past, but he was still pushing the envelope. With the R&B and funk-influenced album Keep Your Eye on Me, released in 1987, he took yet another chance. He collaborated with Terry Lewis and Jimmy Jam, the producers of Janet Jackson's most successful songs, to make it work. The end effect was a new, contemporary sound that retained the essence of Alpert's trademark trumpet. He was able to attract a younger audience with the help of Janet Jackson and Lisa Keith's vocals on songs like Diamonds and Making Love in the Rain. The album had a lot of playing on R&B stations and was a smash, despite some critics not knowing what to think of this new approach. Alpert has succeeded once more in reinventing himself while retaining his distinctive qualities. However, Alpert's impact extended beyond his own compositions. In the background, he had established one of the most influential record labels ever. With about $200 apiece, he and Jerry Moss founded A&M Records in Alpert's garage in 1962. What started out as a tiny business quickly rose to prominence in the sector. The label initially concentrated on Alpert's own compositions. However, as it expanded, it signed musicians like Joe Cocker, Cat Stevens, and the Carpenters. Janet Jackson, The Police, and numerous others later called it home. A&M was known for granting artists artistic independence, which is uncommon in the field. Legendary recordings like Peter Frampton's Frampton Comes Alive and Carole King's Tapestry were the result of that independence. However, A&M also didn't hesitate to take chances. They signed the Sex Pistols in 1977, which was a surprising choice for a company that usually signed musicians who were polished and radio-friendly. It was short-lived. Only a few weeks later, the band was dropped, but it demonstrated that A&M wasn't scared to push the envelope. A&M was earning more than $300 million annually by the late 1980s. Alpert and Moss then made a significant choice in 1989. Polygram purchased the label from them for almost $500 million. In addition to being a huge payout, it signaled the end of an era. Additionally, the sale wasn't a smooth one. The dispute over creative authority between them and Polygram intensified. In 1998, after feeling ignored, Alpert and Moss filed a breach of contract lawsuit and were awarded an extra $200 million settlement. Alpert never stopped, even after he sold A&M. He continued to create music, experiment with other sounds, and even turned his attention to visual art. His career was about continuously changing, not about following trends. The tone of modern jazz has been shaped by Herb Alpert for more than 60 years. He achieved a significant milestone in September 2024 when he released his 50th studio album, 50. His moniker refers to more than just his music. Additionally, it commemorates his 50 years of marriage to Grammy-winning performer Lonnie Hall. In addition to original songs like Dancing Down 50th Street and Morning Mist, the CD features a new version of Elvis Presley's Are You Lonesome Tonight? And covers like Corcovado, Baubles, Bangles, and Beads. Alpert is still able to bring his music to life even after all these years. 50's debut at the top of the Billboard Contemporary Jazz Albums chart demonstrated that his trademark trumpet sound is still popular. His career numbers are astounding. More than 72 million recordings have been sold worldwide, and they have won 9 Grammy Awards and 15 gold albums. Furthermore, it goes beyond simply performing. He was a co-founder of A&M Records, which would later sign artists like Janet Jackson and the Carpenters. The date of March 31, 2025, will go down in history. Alpert's 90th birthday is being celebrated in style with a special performance at the Jazz at Lincoln Center in New York City. This is not merely a birthday performance. It also honors the 60th anniversary of whipped cream and other treats. He's bringing a fresh lineup to the Tijuana Brass for the first time in more than 40 years. With stops in Boston, Las Vegas, and Denver, the event is a part of a broader U.S. tour. The songs that made him famous will be heard by fans, but with a new twist. Alpert doesn't want to slow down, even at 90. He and Lonnie Hall are still touring, fusing pop, jazz, and Brazilian rhythms to create unforgettable performances. But music isn't the only thing he left behind. Since establishing the Herb Alpert Foundation in 1988, he has contributed more than $200 million to charitable causes and arts education. He gave $17 million to the Harlem School of the Arts and $30 million to UCLA, which established the Herb Alpert School of Music, made it a preeminent center for the arts. It's not simply music that has made Alpert successful. By making wise investments, he has amassed an empire. He is a skilled sculptor and painter, and galleries all around the world have displayed his creations. Brado Grill and Jazz in Bel Air, his jazz club and restaurant, continue to play a significant role in LA's live music landscape. His wealth has also been greatly influenced by real estate, having attributes whose value has increased over time. Herb Alpert is among the wealthiest musicians in history, with an estimated net worth of between $850 million and $900 million. His wealth is derived from real estate ventures, music royalties, the sale of A&M recordings, a $400 million contract with Ronder Music Publishing, and licensing agreements. But money isn't the only aspect of his narrative. It all comes down to passion, creativity, and an unquenchable need to create.